to The Real Mompreneur, where we turn real life, real hustle, and real business into real success. I'm Maya Hollins, and this evening we are talking about something all entrepreneurs, small business owners, innovators, students, moms, dads, adults alike all need to know about, and that's non-disclosure agreements. Now listen, the moment you start sharing recipes, formulas, designs, ideas, thoughts, data, concepts of a plan, people are going to start asking questions. And that's cool. But what's not cool is when they take your information and run off with it and just spread it all across the globe like a messy auntie. Now, here's a little disclaimer before we get into it. I am not an attorney and I will not be giving y'all legal advice. However, I am a contract manager by trade. I have worked for several Fortune 500 companies, all the big guys, working alongside attorneys as a contract manager, drafting up different contracts, specifically NDAs and many others, negotiating them, redlining them, the whole nine. So I'm here to help you. If you don't have big dollars to pay an attorney, we can help. Now that that's out the way, let's get into it. So a non-disclosure agreement is a legally binding contract that says, essentially, I'm sharing something private with you, and I don't want you to share it with anyone unless those people are also on this NDA. The NDA is telling the receiving party that you, as the disclosing party, don't want them talking about anything that you've shared. You don't want them to reproduce it, to copy it, or anything of that nature. It is to remain confidential for X amount of time. Now, there are instances in where the receiving party can share information that was underlined in the NDA as confidential, but it's only really two instances, and that's basically when they ask you for permission and you give them written permission to do so, or if the information that was confidential is no longer confidential and is made public information, then they can go talk about it because it's public information, right? Because NDAs or any legally binding contract can be very overwhelming at first, we are going to break this topic of non-disclosure agreements down in probably 2 or 3 videos, simply so everybody can grasp all of the information. So grab your pens, grab your notebooks, and let's dive in. We are going to start with 2 main clauses. These are probably the 2 most important clauses that help to comprise a NDA. And the first one is confidentiality. And we are going to describe what confidentiality is. I'm going to describe it to you in this video, and you're also going to lay it out in the definitions of your NDA. Confidentiality is what NDAs is all about. It's about keeping information that you, as the discloser to the receiver, keeping all that information confidential, and you keep it confidential with the NDA. Now, here's the thing. When you get ready to describe what confidentiality means to you, granted you can get that information from ChatGPT or Google, here are some important things to note. When you are disclosing information, it's not always verbal. Sometimes you could disclose verbally, or it could be a video you're sharing. It could be an audio you're sharing. It could be just graphics that you're sharing. So you have to make sure that when you are describing what confidentiality means for you, that you fully lay that out in this clause. So, generally speaking, confidential information is any information or material that is proprietary or owned or the brainchild of the discloser. So if you're the person who's giving information, you are the discloser, and confidential information is any information or material that you own or have created. That is the basis of confidential information. Additionally, as a discloser, you don't always have to own the information that you're disclosing. You can simply just be the keeper of it or the sharer of it. So that is still needs to be defined in the confidentiality paragraph. As some of you may or may not know, I own my own company. It is a snack company, and we are called Hollison Signature Bakes. So I actually draft up a lot of my own NDAs. I do have a business attorney, so I send my contracts over to her for her to look at. However, I do have one handy, and I'm going to read off to you guys my confidential definitions for the business that I transact with manufacturers, vendors, retailers, and the like. So verbatim, this is how I describe confidentiality. I'm going to read it off to y'all. Confidential information includes, but is not limited to, recipes, systems, processes, documents, records, data information, my vendors list, sales reports, professional contracts, trade secrets, financial schedules, assignments, partnerships, pricing methods, all of it. Goes on to say, the nature of the information and the manner of disclosure is such that a reasonable person would understand it to be confidential. And that's essentially how that paragraph closes. I do want to drop a little nugget. So, as I mentioned, a lot of that verbiage you can get from a template, you can get from Google, ChatGPT. But you want to be very, very specific to make sure you add what is confidential information to you, to your product, to your service. Let's just say you have a beauty product, a hair care, a shampoo or something. And so you're definitely going to want to say that your formula is confidential information, but you're going to want to add, let's say the reason that your product is such a good product is because not necessarily the formula, but how you produce it. Not necessarily the ingredients specifically, but how you mix everything together. The order in which you do it or something along that line. So you don't only want to mention that your formula is confidential and proprietary, but also your processes and how you produce this. And yes, you probably will share this information with an investor or a partner or a manufacturer or anything. But this is not just for products, it's for services and whatever you may be trying to achieve. Just make sure you take the time to figure out with your attorney or with your partners or just with yourself what is confidential to you, and you put it in there. And if they don't understand, you can make as many definitions as you want. If they don't understand what you mean by processes, it's okay. We got tons and tons of space on this document. We can lay it out for you. So the other important clause, I would say the second most important clause in the NDA, is the time period or the termination period. So basically how long you want the receiver to keep your information confidential. And this can exceed the lifetime of the NDA. If your NDA expires in 5 or 10 years, you can request within the time period clause that your information still be held confidential X amount of years. So right here in one of my NDAs, I have confidential information disclosed 10 years. 10 years following the effective date. So from the day that me and the person I'm sharing this information with signs this contract, 10 years, I expect them to keep whatever I disclosed confidential. I will say the standard you'll see is 3 years. You might see 5 years, 10 years, a little on the higher side. But I worked for a really big company many years ago in aerospace, and they required on all of their contracts, similar to this one, 60 years, that the receiving party keeps all of their confidential information confidential for 60 years. This is very important. We should never skip over this clause. You need to think about it. You should have some wiggle room for negotiation. But I will say, if any of your receiving party comes back to you and says, well, 10 years or 8 years is a long time for me to keep this confidential, it's giving red flag. it's giving red flag. Because why? Why? Who do you want to talk to about my things and why? However, 3 years is standard. So is 5 years. I have 10 in my NDAs. I have yet to have any pushback, which is great. So let's just keep that in mind. Make sure y'all taking y'all notes on this, okay? This is good stuff. So, family, friends, associates, and subscribers, what have we learned in this little short video? Well, first we've learned that NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, are legally binding. They are powerful, they are effective, and you probably need one. Secondly, we have learned about confidentiality and confidential information. That is the basis. That is the purpose of you needing an NDA. Your confidential information must stay confidential. And the time period. Be very mindful about how long you want the receiving party to keep your secrets secret. This is Maya Hollins. I'm the Real Mompreneur. Catch you on video number 2.